and welcome to the LLG Grapevine podcast. You're listening to Helen McGrath, Head of Public Affairs, and Dennis Hall, LLG Bulletin Editor.
Hello, everyone.
Now, too late to feature in last week's bulletin, but of immense interest to all who work in local government, is the government's long-awaited response to the Committee for Standards in Public Life's Ethical Standards Review. We've waited a long time for it, and without pre-warning, the response was published last Friday afternoon, accompanied by a letter to Lord Evans by Minister Kemi Badenoch. Commentators have no doubt been poring over the content, and we will be producing a short guide to the outcomes, which for many will be a mixed bag. While sanctions will not be forthcoming, LLG are absolutely delighted that following over 2 years of campaigning, the government have responded favourably to the provision of statutory protection for monitoring officers. The committee recommended in January 2019 that disciplinary protections for statutory officers should be enhanced by extending disciplinary protections to all disciplinary actions, such as suspension or formal warnings, not just dismissal. The government's response agreed in principle with this recommendation, stating that it recognised this would be pertinent to monitoring officers who may not necessarily be afforded the same seniority in the organisational hierarchy of a local authority as the two other statutory officers, head of paid service and the Section 151 officer, and who may be subject to personal pressures when conducting high-profile breach of conduct investigations. The government have pledged to engage with sector representative bodies of all tiers of local government to seek views on amending the Local Authority Standing Orders England Amendment regulations to provide disciplinary protections for statutory officers. In consequence, LLG looks forward to being involved in the amendment of those standing orders. In other news, there's been more government announcements this week on the Ukraine situation and its impact on our sector. Dennis, tell us more.
Indeed, Helen, there is more, and the government has set out its plans for those councils that are exposed to Russian companies. Here's my report. 7th of March, Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove wrote to councils about the government's sanctions on Ukraine and Belarus. In the letter, he urged councils to keep up to date with the list of sanctions which can be expected to grow, and confirmed that UK legislation, guidance and updates are now available on the Russia financial sanctions pages on gov.uk. Gove also urged councils to continue to scrutinise their contracts and determine their exposure to Russian and Belarusian-owned companies, whilst also praising the work already being done so far. He also confirmed that the government is exploring what options are possible to assist councils who are considering their contracts and hope to update councils as soon as practically possible. If you have concerns, questions, or seek advice, you are asked to contact the department at lgccommercial@levellingup.gov.uk. All the key links are in Bulletin 11, and of course, LLG has already issued guidance on this important topic. Now, please share with us your own experiences of dealing with contracts connected to Russian companies and post them to the forum page on our new website. What other matters are you reviewing? Let us know.
Turning to domestic matters, it's that time again for many to consider the pre-election period as a number of authorities move towards elections. On the 5th of May, local elections are taking place across Scotland and Wales, in London and some English authorities. For UK and devolved government departments, the pre-election period for local elections is not fixed to any particular date. The general convention is that special care should be taken in the 3 weeks preceding the elections. In 2022, that will be 14th of April to the 5th of May. There are, of course, numerous changes coming at rapid pace to the electoral process. The Elections Bill continues its passage through the House of Lords and is currently going through committee stage. One to note for your EROs, new burdens funding will be provided by central government to cover the additional costs caused by introduction of the policies in the bill. The Constitution Group Analysis Team in DLUHC will shortly be in touch with all EROs to request information via a survey which will inform their cost modelling and ensure their assumptions for the new burdens funding are sound. So you want to have a conversation with your ERO about that in advance. Dennis, I see that new legislation has emerged concerning economic crime and new measures to confront it both here and abroad. What's the news?
Yes, the Ukraine situation has accelerated the government's approach to this, and there's more to come later in the year. Here's my briefing. The government has recognised for several years that the lack of transparency about property ownership in the UK has made it easy for corrupt individuals to launder money through the UK. The war in Ukraine has hugely increased the urgency of these measures in order to tackle illicit flows of Russian money through the UK and to strengthen the UK's ability to enforce sanctions against individuals. So, the government has decided to expedite some of the planned reforms, bringing forward its first bill ahead of a second economic crime bill planned for later in the year. Now, this new bill is the Economic Crime Transparency and Enforcement Act 2022. The Act establishes a new register of foreign owners of UK property, which will be held by Companies House. The register will cover all property bought in England and Wales since the 1st of January 1999. Anonymous foreign owners of property in the UK will be required to reveal their true identities, bringing the rules for foreign property owners in line with those for property owned by UK companies. Property owning overseas entities will be required to reveal who their beneficial owners are, and this information will have to be verified by Companies House. Overseas entities will be given 18 months from the date that the Act comes into force to register their beneficial ownership. Failure to do so, or providing false information, will be punishable by a fine or up to 2 years in prison. Entities that fail to reveal their beneficial owner will be prevented from selling the property. And if an entity did sell a property under these circumstances, it would be liable to a fine and/or up to 5 years in prison for the company's officers. The Act also strengthens the UK's existing regime concerning what are known as unexplained wealth orders. These are used against politically exposed people or those suspected of being connected to serious crime and whose assets seem disproportionate to their income. The Act also introduces a number of new measures to make it easier to sanction people for breaching sanctions. You'll find all the detail behind these headlines in the postings in Bulletin 11.
Now, the government's decision to transfer thousands of elderly and disabled patients from hospital into care homes at the start of the pandemic was one of the most devastating policy failures in the modern era the High Court has heard. A judicial review against Health and Social Care Secretary Sajid Javid, Public Health England and NHS England over alleged failures to protect care home residents brought by the daughters of 2 men who died from COVID-19 while in care, began on Monday of last week and is challenging 6 key policies and decisions, including the March 2020 discharge policy, which led to thousands of hospital patients being released into care homes while the virus was circulating. Now, this is a case which has been running for some time and upon which we have previously covered back when permission was granted, brought by Dr. Kathy Gardner and Faye Harris. Between March and June 2020, care homes in England and Wales registered more than 20,000 deaths of elderly and disabled residents linked to COVID-19, according to data from the Office for National Statistics. The Department of Health and Social Care has said, every death is a tragedy, and we work tirelessly to protect the public from the threat to life and health posed by the pandemic, and specifically sought to safeguard care homes and their residents. The outcomes of this case could have a knock-on effect upon local authorities, so LLG will be following it carefully. Now, Dennis, I see that your next item takes us on a journey to the land of Nod. What on earth is this next item all about?
Helen, just occasionally our work involves not just the subconscious, but also the unconscious. Here's my story. Now, spare a thought, won't you, for the noble Lord Young of Norwood Green, a member of the House of Lords. BBC News reported last week that a member of the House of Lords was told off for falling asleep in the debating chamber. Lord Young of Norwood Green wanted to take part in a debate about draft regulations concerning genetically modified organisms late one Monday evening. But as he was about to speak, he was forcefully reprimanded by Government Whip Lady Bloomfield, who said the noble lord was fast asleep for the entire duration of the minister's speech. When Lord Young started to respond, Lady Bloomfield replied, "I had to send you a note via the doorkeeper in order to wake you up." I might perhaps have been a little more sympathetic to the old boy, given the circumstances, as this story reminded me of the many hours I myself have spent in both Cabinet and committee, and I admit too that I often came very close to dozing off. So here's the question for monitoring officers and governance specialists. What steps would you take if you saw a council member taking a catnap during a meeting? Answers please to the forum page on our new website.
Well, let's hope our listeners have managed to make it to the end of this week's podcast. But if you missed even a little bit, or want to learn more about the topics covered and many more besides, then please see Bulletin number 11, available on the LLG website now. And on that note, it's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me too.
Thank you for listening. Have a good week.